we are fixing the leak around the escape hatch. Okay, so you can see the cracks in the old sealant that was on there, and what I'm doing is I am taking the painter's scraper and just using it to scrape out the old sealer that was poured down on the flange, and just kind of sloppily applied. The flange has the standard roll of putty tape under it, and then the flange of the escape hatch is screwed down onto the putty to the roof. I'm not really convinced that putty is the best stuff to seal. I think butyl rubber is a better sealer. So anyway, I have this painter's scraper you see me using there, and it's sharpened up a bit, and I keep the two edge points a little bit rounded so that it won't just dig right into the aluminum sheet roofing. That would not be a good thing to do. And so sometimes it's a little harder to scrape than others. It's easier to scrape where there is water penetrated under it. It's already separated, so it just comes right up. But then on top of the flange, it's a little tougher because that's higher up and water is going to the lower point. So you see I just kind of have a twisting side to side twist to remove the more stubborn sealant. So we're going to clean the sealer out from around all of the screws, and later on we'll be taking just a pair of pliers to the heads of the screws and just checking real quick for tightness on the ones that are obviously loose. And there were only about 3 of them that needed to get tightened in. So I'm scraping the old sealer that went up the flange on the side of it, getting rid of that, and then scraping off all of the stuff that was on top of the flange. We are looking at, that was the front of the flange where the hinge for the hatch cover is. So now we are repeating the process on the left side. You see I just kind of worked the chisel down into the sealer. The sealer is already in many parts peeled away from the sidewall of the flange, so I just kind of jammed the chisel down there and work it back and forth and remove the stuff. So this is a little bit of a special. You see that I chiseled away some of the old die core that seals up the bracket for the solar panel, and I will reseal that a little bit later, right at the end of the video. Actually, you'll see me use the trowel to put some die core in. I ended up with almost exactly the right amount of die core to finish resealing this cover, and I had to rob a little bit of die core from another area to put where the solar panel bracket is, to seal that and finish the job. So I'm still scraping away there, working down the wall of the hatch, trying to peel away the loose old sealer that's on there. And there's like 3 or 4 different sealants that have been used over the years. I did put one sealer in there that it worked about 3 years, and it's the gray stuff on top. I thought it was like an elastomeric product, kind of like Spantex, but it was not like Spantex. It didn't stay rubberized, and it didn't really do that good of a job of sealing. It worked good for a couple of years, and then it failed. And so now I'm at the point where I'm cleaning, just working around all the screw heads, making sure that they are clean, and when I take the self-leveling die core, that it will flow down around and seal up all the screw heads. So some areas go pretty fast, other areas not so fast. But you just take your time and get it cleaned up nicely, and you will have good results. Die-core self-leveling is really almost a foolproof way to reseal your hatches, fans, fridge covers, anything that goes onto the roof. I'm just sold on die-core products. And now I'm starting the third side. This is the back side. And you can see that some of that comes up very quickly, and that obviously it had some water had accumulated under it and broke loose. And I think some of the reason that this seal failed is that I had been in eastern Washington a lot of the summer, so the truck camper was getting beat down on by the sun, and a lot of expansion and contraction was going on, and then just the heat was in there too. So it was rough environmental conditions for all the sealers. I was planning to be putting a new hatch down here, but this happened before I got a new hatch. So I had plans to remove this, put down a new hatch, and so I'm kind of I was thinking about taking this one up and putting die-core under the flange, but I think I'm going to put a new escape hatch on the truck camper here before too much longer. Obviously putting new die-core sealant will extend that for a couple of years, because now I've got a new seal on it. So I'm just about done peeling off all the old sealant. I am working on the right side of it now. You can see to the left and right that I've got a pretty good accumulation of old strips of sealant piled up now. And so I'm just making sure that I get all the loose stuff in that outer ridge of dark old sealer outside of the flange, and that stuff there, that line that you see, is stuck down pretty good. So there you see me, I'm just kind of testing a couple of the obviously loose screws, and there were only a couple of them that were loose, and so I didn't feel a need to continue checking. I did look at things as I was scraping, and for the most part everything looks like it was attached pretty well. So now I am cleaning up some of the debris and putting it all into the garbage cans. There is the lacquer thinner. That is what I used to clean all the metal and sealants that were accumulated on the flange and the sheet metal of the roof. Lacquer thinner is a good cleaner. It dries very quickly. That way you can clean things up and then work with them in a short period of time. Denatured alcohol is another cleaner that works really well. It cuts through the solvents, cleans things up, and it evaporates away very quickly. I think the lacquer thinner is a little stronger of a solvent. Okay, so when you are using lacquer thinner or any solvents like alcohol too, you want to use gloves. With lacquer thinner, you only have a few minutes of working time because the gloves will begin to disintegrate. And I'll show you that in a minute here. Right about the time I finish, the gloves fail on me. So I have a sacrificial rag there that I poured a bunch of lacquer thinner on, and I am just scrubbing everything down with it, making sure that I get all the old stuff cleaned up. So you just take your time, do things right, and you get good results. And so now I'm going to show you that my gloves have disintegrated. And that happened just right when I finished. So timing was good on that. Okay, now I have to reach down and get, okay, now it is just starting to drizzle. Great timing on that. So fortunately, I had a large umbrella with me, and I opened it up, held it over the opening, and started to, I finished my cleaning. I just finished cleaning with solvent, and now I'm using a clean rag to wipe up any residue that might be laying around, and any surface lacquer thinner will dry up within a minute or so. Once I dry it up with the towel, it'll just dry away real quick. So I will have this all cleaned up here in just a minute, and then we will start to put Dicor. Oh, then I'm getting a phone call from somebody. I was supposed to leave for work out of town today, and I discovered I had a leak in my roof, so I had to fix it, and this is the fix. So I am applying self-leveling Dicor. This is to the front edge of the hatch, and you see that I put the tip of the caulk tube into the gap between the flange and the roof and squirt forcibly Dicor sealant into the gap. And then now this I'm doing a little bit different. I'm putting it on pretty thick, and so I'm using the trowel to spread the Dicor out over everything. This is the front edge, and so I'm just putting a little extra on here. You see the hinge for the cover right there in front. Okay, so I have that done. Now I'm going to do the right side. I need to clean up the little water droplets that have gotten there, and I need a new tube of Dicor. And so you always want to be careful when you're working with this stuff, because any caulk or any sticky stuff, it just seems to get on you no matter how hard you try. Okay, so I'm showing you this at normal speed. Everything else is at 4 times. So I'm putting the tip of the tube into the crack between the flange of the escape hatch and knocking over my camera. And so I'm squirting Dicor between the flange and the roof, making sure to work it into any open space under the flange that can be filled. Now we're coming back over it, and we are going to cover each screw head with Dicor, and the Dicor will self-level over the screw heads and seal all that up. And when I finish putting Dicor over each of the screw heads, then I'm going to make another pass over the edge of the flange, and the Dicor will flow down over the edge of the flange and create a good seal over everything. So I'm just making a slow, steady bead right over the top of the flange. And I'm not sure. I think I might be working this a little bit more, but trying to make sure that everything is all nice and coated in there. Okay, so now we're going to do the back end, and I need to take a rag and just make sure that I get all of the water droplets up and off of there. Fortunately, it did not turn to rain. It just drizzled a little bit and then stopped. So there you see me working the Dicor into the seam, the gap, and then covering the screw holes. And now I'm going to make a pass back over it and let the Dicor flow down over the flange onto the roof. And that will create a good seal. And this is the third and last side. And so once again, same technique, clean up the water droplets, then put the Dicor into the seam between the flange and the roof, and then come back and put a dab of Dicor over each screw head, and that will self-level. And then one bead right over the top of it. and that will just self-level and cover everything. Dicor is a real nice product to work with. So now I'm putting a little more Dicor on the screw heads of the front edge and working things a little bit more. So I'm standing on top of the bed, and I slid the cover of the hatch out through its hinge. It's a little bit tricky to do it, but I was able to do it. So I'm still kind of working that other side. Just getting a little extra Dicor on it. And there you can see I've got the umbrella. Okay, so what I did is put a little more Dicor on that. And you can see that everything is covered now. So now what I need to do is I wanted to cover that gap between the bracket for the solar panel and just make sure that everything was sealed up there. So I'm stealing a little bit of Dicor from the other side of the flange where I had some extra and just troweling it into place. And so the Dicor will continue flowing out and settling. It had a pretty good skin on it by the time I finished the job here. And hopefully tomorrow everything will have set up okay and there will be no leaks in the camper, because I am going out of town for a couple of weeks to work on the project, and it'll be nice to have a dry place to live while I'm away from home. So we are just about finished here. I'm just doing the finishing touches on troweling that out. One little spot there. And there we go. Perfection. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Please do subscribe, like, share, and I invite you to watch my other videos on how to travel and lots of other stuff. See you on the next video.